HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Islands Stories by Dionne Irving. Read by Chanté Mccormick. No man is an island, entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. John Donne. Meditation 17. We're gonna help our people, help them right. O Lord, help us tonight. Cast away that evil spell. Throw some water in the well, and smile. Bob Marley, Smile, Jamaica. Florida Lives. In hindsight, I can see now that we never should have left San Francisco. My husband was unemployed and I was working only part-time, teaching at a private elementary school, making papier-mâché, making eyes at the principal. We'd spent 7 years racking up credit card debt and taking jobs we hated. We played the lottery and blew the last of our savings on a Danish modern couch. We laughed, we cried. We were in our 30s, childless, broke, on the verge of cliché. Until the call from a fledgling fern nursery arrived, looking for someone, anyone, willing to market their little company, willing to start over in Florida, relocation expenses included. Before we left, there was a party in our honor. Family, friends, old and new, lovers, enemies, co-workers. It was at a Thai restaurant in the Tenderloin, part charming teak tables, part roaches in the bathroom. At a table set for 20, we were toasted amid hot platters of pad thai and lemongrass chicken and so much wine. San Francisco and so many of the people there were a part of the story of me and my husband. The past imperfect, the verb we would conjugate ourselves out of by putting the distance of a continent between us and it, us and them. We could pretend that the things that made us different from each other in San Francisco, mine, an immigrant's understanding of the world, and his, a legacy of the W.E.B. Du Bois idea of the talented tenth. That idea that a handful of blacks would use art and education to lead the rest to salvation, use their privilege to remake black life in America, didn't actually matter all that much. In the dim lighting of the restaurant, everyone looked a little nostalgic and a little relieved. And when anyone asked us, why Florida? They'd wrinkled their noses, looks of disgust telegraphing images of 6-foot-long alligators, bath salt-eating criminals, and that giant mouse presiding over his southern fiefdom of plastic and capitalism. I responded, did you know that Apopka, Florida, is the international foliage capital of the world? As if that explained it. As if anything could. The two of us drank down our doubts, and then we drank a bit more. And with the booze and good vibes coursing through us, we messed around in the back of a taxi on the way home, like we used to when we first met. This was how we started our Florida lives. Our rented house in Apopka was walking distance from a swamp, freeway adjacent, perfect. Florida smelled like Jamaica, like what I remembered of it, a mixture of rain-soaked earth and blooming flowers. In Florida, we were credit poor and cash rich again. Florida was like living in a giant discount store. Florida with its miles of air-conditioned shopping plazas, its preponderance of drive-through liquor stores, and the rent that made it seem like you were living almost for free. In Florida, we made less money, but it went so much further. San Francisco broke was Central Florida middle class, and we could live like the bougie frauds we always wanted to be. Here, our dinners were feasts, expensive cheeses, $25 bottles of wine, meat without the bright orange, reduced for quick sale sticker. Oh, the luxury. In Florida, I played the part of the wife that my dark-skinned mother-in-law had always imagined, the light-skinned daughter-in-law there to inject some good hair into the family's genetic pool, to give the family that taste of the American dream that all of their hard work in private schools could not. In the Great Migration, his people had gone west, not north from the American South, starting from Alabama. Their California lives were going to be better than those of their kinfolk who went to Chicago. Their American dream would be glamorous. Their version of New Black America would be envied. The transformation completed with that husband of mine, with his polo shirts, his affinity for German cars, his confusion that not everyone had a trust fund, a summer home, parents to call when you were in a jam. Their plan, as I understood it, meant a life that would bring them close to white, or closer at least. A plan to make slavery a distant memory, a plan not unlike my Jamaican family's own. That I was light-skinned made the idea of the imagined future seem closer. I would give them the light-skinned grandkids who would have access to private clubs and better schools and all the privileges of near-whiteness that his family could imagine and those that they couldn't. In Florida, I stayed home and played around with complicated recipes. My Jamaican mother's cow tongue soup and escovitch fish, his mother's macaroni and meatloaf. Love, American fusion style. We each gained 5 pounds. We stuck my husband's first paycheck on the refrigerator with a flourish. We bought more things we didn't need, teacup-sized succulents, an electric wine opener, and hung our new drapes, hot pink and cream, with aplomb. In the evenings, we dragged plastic beach chairs out onto the front lawn and watched a colony of bats circle our house at sunset. We watched them arc upward and wend their way in slow, concentric circles above the neighborhood. We toasted them with plastic cups, celebrating our escape. We were going to create a new version of Black millennial marriage, Black poverty chic, reverse aspirational. We were going to use the mass of land between us and our California lives to evaporate what had been so messy and let the spell of Florida take hold. Secretly, I loved. Spreading out across the bed after my husband left for work, devouring whole boxes of hot and sticky donuts, and knowing that no one here knew us. Secretly, I hated my husband's colleagues at the fern nursery and their questions. You tan so well. Aren't you exotic looking? How come you're so much lighter than him? And where did you say your family's from? In Florida, we were the same and not the same. We were a young Black married couple. We were a unit, but I couldn't understand the rhythms of what it meant to be Black in the most American of American places. But my husband did. He knew what it meant to live in a neighborhood where we were the only Black family. He knew what it meant that his boss spoke of his hard work as if it were a novelty, knew how to smile when someone asked you if you knew their Black acquaintance from high school or college, understood that he needed to be well-dressed at the grocery store, at the post office, at the car wash. These things were second nature. And me? I tried to pretend to understand. Me? I was taking lessons about how to be Black in the American South, how to be Black in Florida, how to sublimate yourself even when it felt unnatural. Together, we loved our new bicycles, buying wine in the grocery store, the plush seats of our new SUV, the easy life, the suburban life. Together, we hated the way Florida always made you feel like you were standing in a damp basement, the word irregardless, and our neighbors. Our neighbors. Oh, we hated them most of all. Even before we met them, we knew they weren't the kind of people we wanted to know. Yellow grass, cartoon print bed sheets in the front window instead of curtains, and cigarette butts like breadcrumbs from their carport to their patio. We had lived in the house only for a week when they rang our doorbell in 3 short staccato bursts. I peered at them through the peephole for a beat too long. My husband hadn't learned to be anything but casually suspicious of people. Like I said, he wasn't Jamaican. He told me to open the door. They weren't there to hurt us or make our lives more difficult. "It's a couple," he said. "They're being neighborly." I opened the door. using one arm to close off the space between my body and the door frame, my other hand on my hip, not opening the door all the way. They introduced themselves as Crystal and Ricky Fletcher. I didn't offer up our names, but my husband, oh my husband, so trusting, hovered behind me in the brown and orange Formica tiled hall of our rented home and not only invited them in, but invited them to sit on our blue velvet Chesterfield sofa, my blue Chesterfield sofa, in dirty cut-off shorts. He was like that. He trusted all people to a fault. My mother said it was all the time he'd spent at private school. Too much tennis camp, she said, and not enough Jesus. For her, not enough religion was a straight path both to hell and to people like the Fletchers. Maybe those were the same thing. Crystal noticed right away how I looked at her. I'd never been good at hiding what I felt. "I'm so sorry," she said. "We've been working in the yard all day. I usually dress much nicer than this." It was a twofer. That yard hadn't been touched in at least 3 months, and Crystal's T-shirt, "I put the hoe in hotel." In Jamaica, you learn to back away from people like Crystal. My parents hadn't raised me in America to socialize with crystals. They had come to America to make sure I met people like my husband, black people with more education than sense. They had come to America to keep me away from places like Apopka. But I hadn't learned, ever, to save a penny for every penny you spent, and here I was in Florida, after all, stacks of credit card bills piled on a table in the front hall, and Crystal on my sofa showing me all the ways I'd failed. I offered our neighbors wine, which they guzzled greedily. Ricky wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and pushed his glass forward for me to pour him a second. "Did you know that Lake Apopka is the 4th largest lake in the continental United States? It actually isn't. Did you know it's teeming with bass?" I wasn't ever going to find out. Ricky knew, and he also knew about the best spots in the lake to find those bass and about the local real estate and the value of $1. When we got around to the subject of jobs, Ricky explained that he worked as a handyman for the Arabs, which he pronounced Arabs, who owned the Hojo on Main Street. He looked at me a little funny when he said it, like perhaps he was trying to figure out if I was one of them. "They're the good kind," he said finally, holding out his empty glass for a third refill. "Not the terrorist kind. Man, Patel even jump-started my car when the battery died last week." "Hells yeah," Crystal echoed. "They're good people." I inched closer to my husband on the love seat and farther away from Ricky's mud-caked boots. I squeezed my husband's arm to make sure he saw the boots, the ones leaving flakes of mud on our floor. But he pulled away from me, and so I asked Crystal what she did for work. "Oh, I'm between things right now," she said, twirling a limp strand of dirty blonde hair around her finger. "But I was working as a medical assistant in my last job. Got to wear scrubs and everything." The idea of Crystal being allowed to do anything medical terrified me. I made an excuse about starting dinner. There was an awkward pause where I should have asked them to stay, but instead smiled graciously and took their glasses. In the kitchen, I performed the Caribbean magic my mother taught me to get rid of unwanted company, turning a broom upside down and sprinkling salt on it. It was either completely effective or wishful thinking, but moments later, with relief, I heard the click of the front door. As they passed by the kitchen window, they couldn't see me behind the thick crepe paper blinds. I heard Ricky murmur, "I can see he's black, but what is she?" "I'm not sure," Crystal responded. "I can't tell. It's so hard to tell these days." And what was I really? I wondered as I leaned over the sink, trying to hear the rest of the conversation. But by then they were too far away, and anything else I might have heard was muffled when my husband turned on the TV in the next room. "They seemed nice," my husband called out. Nice. The word hung limply in the air between us. It meant everything and nothing. It was just what I'd said about him back when he was the cute guy in the next apartment. Not the man I was going to marry. Not the man I did marry. I mixed a vodka tonic and came into the living room. "They're horrible people," I said, sitting next to him on the couch. "The worst kind." "What kind is that?" "They seemed all right to me." I searched for a diplomatic way to say trashy. This was one of our San Francisco problems, the way my husband accused me of snobbery. So I didn't respond, and I gulped the drink instead. "And you," my husband said, prodding me ever so slightly in the rib. "I thought you were going to make dinner." We sat there and drank vodka tonics until the street went dark, until the infomercials came on, until we fell into drunken, ugly sleep, arms akimbo and mouths open. But I was right, and it didn't take long for my husband to hate them too. We heard their fights almost daily, especially in the early morning hours when the quiet drinkers have passed out and the belligerent ones are gearing up for a fight, and then it was, "Fuck you," and "Nah, fuck you." We did not fight like this. We fought like white people on TV. We whispered things under our breath. We exchanged terse statements on Post-it notes throughout the house like a kind of study guide to the arguments we were having. We did drink. We did fight. We did not drink and fight, especially not in this Florida life. Certainly not in this picture of ourselves that we were working so hard to maintain. The Fletchers' fights usually ended with Ricky sitting in his truck with the windows rolled down listening to Metallica's Master of Puppets. After Welcome Home, there was a pause while he flipped the cassette over in the tape deck, and then we all heard the rest of the album. Ricky listened to the album once all the way through if it was a small fight. But when things were really bad, when we heard the crash of plates or glasses, he would listen to it 3 or 4 times before heading back into the house. After nights like that, we'd see him heading off to work or getting the mail, and they'd smile at us innocently as though the night had been devoid of shrieks and cries. And we hated them for that, too. The loud way they railed at each other, the way they could pretend we weren't all hearing. Every time I would remember what my mother always said about screaming like a fishwife in the market. That was not going to be me. No, sir. We hated them more when they started borrowing things we knew they had no possibility of returning. Cigarettes, rubber bands, ice cubes, Cokes, flour. The kinds of things that require a trip to the store to replace. They never went to the store. Other than greasy paper sacks of fast food, I never saw them bring much into the house at all. I kept our pantry stocked, like I had been taught. Enough food to take us through an apocalypse or two. So it shouldn't have been any surprise when roaches flooded into our kitchen. No amount of sealing off could keep them out of the house. At the hardware store, we learned that in Florida, a blend of kudzu and heat, a mixture of north and south, a dangling participle on the United States, they were called palmetto bugs. But they were roaches, all right. We spent the weekends caulking and filling in gaps and trying to figure out how they got in. Roaches don't die easy deaths. They survive nearly everything. A model in which we took solace, something for us to aspire to. The Fletchers seemed to turn up just as often, in the middle of our private, shameful behaviors, eating strips of cold steak from the refrigerator, watching sitcoms, tequila-fueled karaoke contests, normal stuff. They rang the doorbell to ask for something or just to talk. In the evenings, my husband always tried to say we were on our way out, had just come home, were on the phone to my frail and incidentally quite dead grandmother over the landline to Jamaica. The days were harder. I wasn't working, and Crystal liked to stop by to drink my expensive coffee and complain about Ricky. But mostly, she asked questions, each conversation a kind of song where the response was incredulity. San Francisco, she'd say, as though I'd grown up on the moon. Or, your family's from Jamaica? Before repeating the tired old stereotypes, the ones about ganja and the Rastafari. As if my family would ever know the Rastafari. Who is she kidding? Her other favorite topic was our neighbors in the cul-de-sac, a retired couple and a deaf postal worker. They're so fucking stuck up, Crystal said one day, when she'd cornered me out in the backyard as I pulled crabgrass from the lawn that was nearly beyond repair. My husband and I pictured plastic patio furniture, a little kettle grill, something Florida, something kitsch. Watching me at this task, performed in khaki shorts, would have destroyed my father, whose wedding toast to my husband had ended with the admonition that if he was marrying a lady, he better be able to afford the people that a lady needs in order to be taken care of. In my mind, it should have been Crystal pulling that grass while I sat on the porch. They seem harmless. Oh, you don't even know the half of it. She sat with her legs tucked under her on the cracked concrete patio, picking off the ants that migrated to her arms from the nearby anthill. What makes you say that? I asked, throwing another weed into my growing pile. Well, like last year when we had a party, that postal bitch called the police, like she could hear anything anyway. And then Ricky got in the cop's face, told him he had a right to have a party any damn time he wanted to. Even though she didn't continue, I had an idea where that story ended. See what I mean? She said, stretching out her legs. Total assholes. At the end of our 6th month in Apopka, the day we saw the Remax sign on the Fletcher's lawn, we celebrated. We went to dinner at an Indian restaurant. We ate tandoori chicken, basket after basket of naan, and my husband touched my leg and looked at me in the same way he had in the back of the taxi. And for the first time ever, we talked about children, imagining who they would be and what they would be like. We chose ridiculous, overly ambitious names: Winston, Phyllis, and Basil. We were optimistic. Here we were, in the only state that offered second chances as readily as orange juice. We were at least free, even from the Fletchers. The grass on their lawn turned brown before Ricky backed a U-Haul onto their driveway. From our living room, we pushed aside the drapes and watched as they loaded dressers with missing knobs, an entertainment center that sagged in the middle and was cracked halfway up its side, 2 badly stained mattresses. Should we offer to help them? My husband murmured next to me as we sprawled on our bellies, peeking at them from the floor. His tone was unenthusiastic. We watched them try to lift a heavy wood dining table, watched Ricky drop his end and scream, "God damn it, woman, angle it! Just angle it!" Watched Crystal lose her grip on the table, watched the legs of the table wobble unsteadily on the concrete as Crystal burst into tears. "I don't think so," I finally said. "They seem to have it under control." We crawled on our hands and knees into the kitchen and made margaritas that we drank out of straws while lying down on the living room floor so they couldn't see our silhouettes moving around in the house. We got so drunk we passed out there and woke up at 4 a.m., dehydrated and itchy. We peeked out the window, and their house, usually brightly lit at that hour, was dark, and there was no sign of their car. It was strange how everything fell apart after they left, as if our mutual hatred of the Fletchers had been holding us together. I caught one cold, and then another. A fever sent me to bed for a week and gave me dreams of hazmat suits and children with no noses. When I came out of it, the squalor of our house was overwhelming. I felt a kind of sadness I couldn't explain. We didn't know it when we'd rented, but our house had been unoccupied for 3 years. Only we'd been stupid enough to be fooled by a cursory coat of new paint and a neatly trimmed patch of grass. only we'd been silly enough to walk through the rooms with our landlord, delighting over the built-in mid-century modern table and bookcases, gushing, "This would cost a fortune in San Francisco." Weren't we delightfully clueless? So much so that we couldn't see the tree rotting in the backyard, that we mistook for rock the artfully placed crystals of desiccants. Even when I felt better, I lay in bed and spent more days reading magazines in the living room with the air conditioner cranked and went through vodka and orange juice quicker than bread or milk. It was so quiet without the Fletchers. And wasn't it as easy to sink into the sofa as it was into a bottle? While my husband was at work, I made lists of things to talk to him about when he got home. The Fern Museum, the formica that peeled in the second bathroom, the buzzing sounds that sometimes came from the attic during the day. When he got home, I talked at him until he held up his hands and said, "Enough, enough!" And then, "What happened to the living room?" "The magazines," I said. I tried to organize the magazines. They were scattered everywhere, piled on the coffee table and on the chairs. "I can't come home to this," he said, "especially if you aren't working." Then he gave me a funny look. "Are you drinking during the day?" he asked. And I lied. Finally, even the bats turned against us. Bats in the belfry, bats in my hair, baby bats starting a new life in our attic. Those bats that we'd watched each evening had taken up residence in our attic. They were up there mocking me, echolocating themselves in colony-wide orgies. Our empty house, with its wide air ducts, gave them easy access. They flew through our bedroom. They hung off the ceiling fan. They squeaked and squealed and kept us awake at night, flapping through the yard. One had come up through the bathroom drain and had clearly reported back to his friends. I knew because bat droppings littered the kitchen, and one afternoon, a wrinkled face peeked from the entertainment center with wide, sleepy eyes, and all I could think about were vampires and scratchy VHS tapes of Dark Shadows I'd watched as a kid. My husband chased them with a tennis racket. I was put in charge of finding someone to kill them. The first exterminator said that we couldn't move them, as they'd built a roost filled with tiny bat babies. It violated preservation acts, or at least some kind of natural law. His words, not mine. The second exterminator told us the baby bats were called pups, as if they were pleasing little dogs instead of leathery clumps. That exterminator's left iris was covered with a thick, milky white glaze, damaged, I imagined, by the types of chemicals that are used to kill mammalian life, small and large. It was that eye of his that gave me permission to ask how to murder them. Did he have a shop vac? Couldn't he just suck up the pups where they hung, in those gray mucousy-looking sacks? "I don't think so," he said. "I could lose my license." "Let's pretend this never happened," I said to him. Everyone really did get a second chance. Some people got more than that, I told myself over coffee with the third exterminator. He was also a recent transplant to Florida. A recovering meth addict, he was missing most of the hair on his head due to a fire. He told his story with a smile, as if remembering a more peaceful time. My husband offered him money, dinners, companionship, all to entice him into a little bat genocide. The exterminator offered to come back in 4 months once the bats were old enough to leave the roost on their own. We talked about abandoning everything, vanishing, leaving the house to the bats and the roaches, to the mold and the mildew. But our discussions were circular. We kept coming back to my unemployment, our debt. We watched the bats exit the house each night. We drank more wine from plastic cups. We went inside and tried to do a little procreating ourselves. It was animalistic, primal. It was less fun after a week. we called a fourth exterminator. He was
Sample complete. Ready to continue?